and he had just had the Russian missile crisis. Oswald carried around signs, fair play for Cuba. He looked at Kennedy as being sort of on the right wing relative to Cuba. So Walker and Kennedy were in his mind of a piece, is what I would say. Now, David Talbot, I'm just trying to think what I've read of David Talbot's, but
That's okay. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but he wrote The Devil's Chessboard. He clearly, and it's a very long, well-written book, which was and am fascinated by. He concludes that Allen Dulles orchestrated and conducted the assassination of Kennedy. I happen to buy his version lock, stock, and barrel. Roger Stone also has written a book called The Men Who Killed Kennedy, The Case Against LBJ. He obviously concludes that LBJ was the mastermind behind the assassination. I don't think that those books are conflicting of one another. They just draw separate conclusions, but they're really pretty compatible because the evidence that they develop is very consistent. And then there is The Unspeakable, which is another book that I think is Bobby Kennedy Jr. endorses and subscribes to, that likewise concludes that the CIA killed Kennedy. I've read all three books, and I've studied this for 65 years. I have been frustrated that I would never learn the answers to the Kennedy assassination, and I've now, at least for myself, resolved in my own mind that it was totally a CIA operation. Oswald, there are witnesses that saw him in the break room 10 minutes before the assassination sipping a Coca-Cola. There is no question that he was in the break room after the assassination. The school book depository manager rushed through the break room with a Dallas cop. The cop said, "Who is that?" The manager said, "He works here," and they scooted on past. There were two ladies that worked in the adjacent to the stairs going up to the sniper's nest. They both testified that no one climbed those stairs immediately preceding or following the assassination. That would eliminate Oswald being able to get from the break room to the sniper's nest and then back down. But anyway, I mean, we could talk for hours about it. You seem like a very reasonable person. I don't ascribe any bad motives to you at all. We just have read a lot of the same stuff and come to a different conclusion. But my real concern is that, as I said, I fervently believe that the CIA killed Kennedy. And I would quibble with you on your assessment of Kennedy in Russia. Kennedy was actually back-channeling Nikita Khrushchev. And Khrushchev was not a nice person. There's nothing I can say that would be nice about Khrushchev. But he and Kennedy both shared one thing in common, and that is neither of them wanted nuclear war. And they were working behind the scenes, back-channeling with each other and working to avoid a nuclear confrontation. And I think they both cared about about humanity and did not want to be contributing to the end of humanity. And so the theory is that the military-industrial complex and the CIA and the State Department were livid when they found out that Kennedy was back-channeling Khrushchev, and that Kennedy also wanted to get us out of Vietnam, which he had actually helped get us into early in his administration. So there were a lot of reasons for the intelligence community and the military-industrial complex to be really mad at Kennedy. And so that's...
So I talked to Oliver Stone's main guy, after I came out, and he was we met for a few hours, and he talked to me about Stone's theory. And well, first of all, let me say this. Oswald wouldn't know that Kennedy and Khrushchev were together. My point is, in Oswald's view, he was anti-Russian. And I did, by the way, start Devil's Chessboard, and somehow I didn't ever get into it. I've got it on my Kindle, I think. And so I met my good friend of mine, said it's great. On this thing with Oliver Stone, his contention is that Nixon, even at the end of Nixon's term, they had already got together. Again, the CIA was involved in it, a plan to assassinate Castro. And they were going to go get Castro. And they had triangulating fire assassination teams training. They had been And actually, the paymaster for this thing was a guy named Manuel Agario, who ended up being the paymaster, the place in the Mexican money trail in Watergate. He was the guy through whom they were washing money in Mexico City. He was the same paymaster that was dealing with the Castro assassination plot. And the theory is that at some point Kennedy got cold feet, decided not to carry through with it. The CIA was all on board on getting Castro. The mob was on board. The CIA was on board, and so forth. And that Kennedy had rubbed them the wrong way. So I thought but the fellow was very compelling. You would know his name. If I told it to you, I'll think of it in a second. But he's a very well-known Sheehan. I believe it's Daniel Sheehan. You will see him. He's a brilliant guy that was Oliver Stone's brain, so to speak. And he's very well respected, and he and I met. But anyway, I'm not discounting your theories. I mean, and I've spoken. The guy that wrote the best book on Watergate, a guy named Jim Hogan, Hougan, former Atlantic Magazine bureau chief in Washington. He and I met. He wrote the best book about the CIA being involved in Watergate, and he's convinced that Kennedy was assassinated, and he's working on that right now. And he was assassinated by, I believe, the CIA. So I don't doubt there's people I respect. I've just named several who believe that the CIA was involved, and I can't wait to take this to ground to read some of these things and see if I'm convinced.
Well, I would really be interested to know what your take is after you finish The Devil's Chessboard and The Unspeakable by Douglas and Roger Stone's book. They all seem to be pretty congruent to me. And so, as I said, I really was impacted by Kennedy's assassination. I mean, it gripped me as a 10-year-old. And so I've watched it, and now you roll all that forward to present day, and we've got Donald Trump, who had a chance to release the Kennedy files and declined to do so, just like Clinton, Obama, and Biden have had chances to release the files. They all declined to do so. And I have suspicions why they didn't. I think the CIA really is a shadow government. And I think they've done some very bad things. And I think they still have a stranglehold on our government, which is really kind of the point I was leading up to. I worked with Bob Shealy and Charles Bundren. Bob Shealy being in Atlanta, and Charles Bundren is a Texas lawyer who filed a case against the Fulton Board of Elections in the days ensuing after the 2020 election. I've seen the evidence. I have played devil's advocate with our forensic accountants, our special witnesses, our expert witnesses. I've interviewed on this program numbers guys like David Cross in Atlanta. He's a finance guy who developed an obsession about 2020 in Georgia, and a former executive with PepsiCo who is a very credible individual. They independently have looked at 2020 in Georgia, and both concluded that there were 40,000 illegal votes just in Fulton County and as many as 400,000 illegal votes in Fulton County, or in Georgia. Joe Rossi is the PepsiCo guy's name. And you can go on the Secretary of State's own website, Brad Raffensperger's, and you can find, as we have, Bob Shealy. I am a lawyer, but I was not a lawyer on the case. I did fundraising and handled communications for the team. But I did review the briefs and edited the briefs and participated, gave them my 2 cents worth, but I tried not to get in the way as they litigated this case. But it gave me certainly a front row seat to look at the evidence. As I was about to say, 3,200 duplicate ballots are visible on the Secretary of State's website. We paid 20 interns to go through every single one of those ballots. They would identify a ballot as looking as if it were a duplicate, and then they would go back and put them side by side. And no one would deny that they are duplicate ballots. So that gets the 11,780 votes down to 8,000 votes. And now we're You look at the number of ballots that were stuffed into drop boxes, the number of people who were registered to vote from homeless shelters, UPS stores, and abandoned apartment buildings. I mean, the fraud was just incredible. So I asked myself, who could be capable of pulling a conspiracy, if you will, off like that? And I don't think there's any question that there are very few entities that would be able to do that. Donald Trump is a disruptor. He identified the deep state and the Washington swamp. And I just don't think there's any question that the intelligence community in this country, I don't know how far to go with it. And I have to hasten to say, I don't have hard evidence that they were involved. I do have very direct evidence that the media has consistently and persistently lied. I ran for Attorney General of Georgia in 2022, and I was interviewed by many members of the media, and I made them aware of the evidence. They don't dispute the evidence, but they don't write about it. And they invariably start by saying Donald Trump tried to overthrow the 2020 election without evidence. And it just, to me, seems to be JFK. I call it JFK 2.0. It seems to be a political coup to me. And I think it may be another 60 years before we get the truth on that. But
well, I think there's some good stuff written. I'm just been through a book called Debunked by an auditor, and he just goes through all the issues as an auditor. It's very good, by a guy named Epstein. It's worth your reading because he goes through the various swing states and identifies certain types of evidence. In many of these states, I think Georgia was one of them, where somebody will go out and just do a sample, may not be a demographically sound sample, but like sample a number of individuals that supposedly voted by mail, and a certain percentage of those say, no, I didn't vote by mail. I didn't vote.
Well, we uncovered just unbelievable anecdotal evidence from not hundreds, but dozens of people who said that they went to the poll to vote and they were told that they had already voted. And they just said, I didn't. And so how do you prove that you hadn't voted? But you hear it over and over again after 10 or 20 times it takes on the ring of truth.
My only statement on this is that I don't think you need, though, to look at the intelligence agency or anything when you have the Democrats could carry this off very well. I mean, like one of my friends argued with me, oh, gee, you think this is some sort of coordinated effort? How could they do that? Well, there's something called the DNC. There are ground games that are centrally coordinated, and there are many organizations working together. Molly Ball wrote that famous piece in Time magazine about how all these folks got together the big shots to try to influence the election and put a lot of money behind these get out the vote campaigns. Once you start having get out the vote, you're paying people to get out the vote, they can get out the vote, and we know how they can get out the vote.
I'm optimistic in that, like in Georgia, Senate Bill 202 got away with drop boxes except in the polling place, which still makes me scratch my head. I don't understand why you would take your ballot to the polling place and put it in a drop box when you could turn left and go into a voting booth. I mean, there's no intellectual explanation for that to me, other than drop boxes or instrumentalities for fraud is what I believe. So why do we still have them? I don't know. But we don't have COVID. We don't have millions upon millions of absentee ballots being mailed indiscriminately out to people. And there's a piece of me that also kind of believes that regardless of where you are on the political spectrum, that 4 years of ineptness and incompetence and corruption, it doesn't matter what party you're in. Enough is enough. And I think people have kind of warmed up to maybe Donald Trump and accept him with his brashness.
Well, I just hope, I still fear widespread cheating. In Arizona, you don't need to prove citizenship to vote. And so there's one state that may go by the boards. And of course, you still have the Stacey Abrams no check signature type of stuff in Georgia, which Raffensperger rolled over for. So I'm not completely confident as I sit here that there won't be widespread fraud again. And if there is, all hell's going to break loose, is what I'll tell you, because I do think Trump is surging. I think he's going to win if the votes are correctly counted.
I have watched every presidential race since Richard Nixon and Kennedy in 1960. I put on my first bumper sticker as a 7-year-old for Richard Nixon. I probably wasn't acting real independently, but my dad and mom were for Nixon. My relatives were for Nixon, and we came from a small rural town in mid Ohio, and so it was in my DNA. But my point is, in all of my days, and as an observer and a political activist, I have never seen a presidential campaign that has been better conducted and has been more thoroughly, just every single base has been touched. And the competence that the Trump organization has shown has just really blown me away in terms of how well they have done. And they've developed coalitions. I mean, you've got Elon Musk, Bobby Kennedy Jr., and Tulsi Gabbard all supporting the same candidate. And I just tell you, I don't look at it from a partisan standpoint at this point. I'm not worried about a red wave. I'm worried about a red, white, and blue wave. We have got to protect the foundational values of this country, like freedom of speech and the franchise, to be able to have a republic. And I'm like you. Cheating is my number one concern come Tuesday.
Right. No, I'm just got my fingers crossed on this one, because I see if they're controlling the government this time, there's more people coming across the border. They're going to be loosening standards on voting. The government is being used to register people as we speak. I just don't like the whole thing, but we'll see. We'll see. Got to win this one. Maybe there's enough of a surge, like they say, too big to rig. I hope that's true.
To me, that phrase that Trump is so fond of repeating, I get where he's coming from. I just think it's idealistic and a little bit of naivete that may be a result of his, what we know to be a pretty oversized ego. But like yourself, I've been trained as a lawyer. I can argue either side. My internal conversations are very complex sometimes. But in defense of Trump, he makes these outlandish statements, and damned if 6 months later, it turns out that he was right. So let's just hope that he is right this time. I do think there is a movement in this country, and I do think it is a red, white, and blue wave that we're witnessing. I think people really do care about the Constitution and the rule of law, and that's what they're responding to, I hope. Well, John O'Connor, thank you very much. I have thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. We have not agreed on everything, but we've agreed on probably more than we have disagreed on. And those things that we disagreed on, we were able to have a very respectful, I think, reasonable conversation. And I thank you for that.
It's been a great one for me. I've got to get back to Devil's Chessboard is what I got to do.
I really would like to hear from you when you finished it. You've got our media sheet. My cell phone number is on it. Call me anytime. And I don't get to the West Coast very much, but I do have a 1-year-old granddaughter who is in Los Angeles, and we are going to go visit her and her parents in about 2 weeks for Thanksgiving. So I don't know if you come to the East Coast, but if you're ever in West Palm Beach, Florida, I really hope you'll give me a call, and we'll settle all of these very weighty things over a cold beer or maybe some clear liquid if you like vodka. Either one is my...
Sure, absolutely. Absolutely. I'd love that. Well, great conversation, and thank you.
Thank you very much, and I wish you well.
All right. Take care.